What's a greedier plot? Try and steal money from a place with the most surveillance that anyone could encounter? Or would it be running a fake daycare with phantom kids to steal millions of taxpayer money from the government? These are just a couple stories of the greediest people in the world. Number 4. Cheating friends. Hugh Duke Lamb and Ziyi Liu scammed a major Sydney casino called The Star out of over $500,000. Lamb, a now former employee of the casino, was alleged to have conspired with Liu over 3 games of Baccarat. The two communicated before and during the games, conspiring to have Liu walk away with mountains of winnings that the two would later split. The scam was extremely simple at its core. Being the dealer, Lamb communicated with Liu throughout the games to ensure he knew exactly the right moves to make and when to make them. Their secretive teamwork went unnoticed by the people around them, allowing the pair to make off with about $570,000 in cash and $170,000 in chips. The pair probably thought they got away with it, as it was easy to sneak their winnings off casino grounds. They were wrong. Nobody is that lucky when games are played as they should be, and when it does happen, alarm bells go off. With these two, close examination by casino authorities brought the whole scheme to light, and the police were brought in. The pair were arrested in September 2020, with the cops catching Liu at a casino parking lot and Lamb at home in Canley Heights. Authorities showed no hesitation in issuing search warrants, and when police executed those warrants, they hit the jackpot. A house in Canley Heights yielded around $270,000 in cash, another $2,000 in US dollars, along with multiple electronic storage devices thought to hold pertinent evidence, sweetened the deal. Meanwhile, Liu's home in Ryde hosted $300,000 in cash and almost $170,000 in casino chips. Fleecing a casino requires an extreme degree of either intelligence or stupidity. Detective Inspector John Cosgrove pointed out that casinos are full of cameras and that every move is always under scrutiny. A spokesperson for the Star confirmed that notion, saying it didn't take staff long to figure out something was up and alert authorities. Number 3. Knives Out. Kaylee Pepper of Hull, UK, allegedly pocketed around £20,000 from a tragic charity she set up with the best intentions. Pepper set up the Rich Foundation after her brother caught a blade to the spine in 2015. The charity existed to help those left behind by victims of tragedies such as gun and knife violence and to advocate for legal means to reduce such tragedies. Richard Pepper met a violent end right outside his Hull home. The perpetrator, Daniel Flatley, was charged with manslaughter and sentenced to 11 years behind bars. The crime left Kaylee in ruin. She expressed that she wanted to keep her brother's memory alive. This sentiment eventually led her to establishing the Rich Foundation, which helped victims' families. The foundation collected funds for final expenses and advocated public awareness about dangerous weapons and violent crime issues. While her intentions in 2015 may have been pure, by 2018, it wasn't hard to see that temptation was getting the better of her. Pepper came into contact with Jenny Dees, who had lost her son to an accident with a modified air gun earlier that year. The Rich Foundation stepped in to help raise funds for little Stanley's funeral, but some of the money went missing. 2019, £2,850 raised by 3 women intending to donate to local schools went missing after they handed it over to the Rich Foundation. Pepper gave them several excuses and even forged an email from GoFundMe. Eventually, Pepper was found to have pocketed somewhere around £20,000 throughout the years. The prosecution, however, maintains that the actual amount stolen is closer to £33,000. Around £1,240 made its way into her personal bank account on one occasion. Another time, she spent over £300 on holidays and gambling. In one sinister photo, she was even caught at a ladies' night function for Stanley Metcalf with her hand in the cash box. Dee's fury ultimately led to the scammer's downfall. Of everybody that had a reason to throw Pepper to the wolves, Dee's had the strongest. The woman became suspicious when the big raffle at Ladies' Night raised a mere £88. Dee's friends told a different tale, collectively claiming to have thrown down far more cash. That suspicion led Dee's to investigate on her own, which eventually helped the police bring Pepper down. The woman had lost her young son, and Pepper's theft essentially made a mockery of both the boy's legacy and his mother's pain. When most people think of air guns, they think of airsoft sports played with minimal armor and plastic toys that can barely pierce a soda can. The reality, however, is that modern air guns at the high end can compete shot for shot with their black powder brethren. The catch, however, is that regulations are looser on air guns in many cases, and they're easier to illegally modify. That's basically what Albert Granin did. While the UK requires a firearms license for air and black powder weapons, air guns with low enough power are largely unregulated. Grannon's gun was bought as a low-powered unit, essentially a toy, but modified to pack a punch. The circumstances are unclear, but somehow 6-year-old Stanley took one of those overpowered shots to his abdomen while visiting his great-grandfather Grannon. The man's story was that he checked if the gun was loaded and shot it into the ground. It then ricocheted and hit Stanley. Forensic results apparently confirmed that was not the case. The boy was found injured in the home and later succumbed to his injuries in the hospital. Grannon was characterized as showing no emotion or remorse throughout the case. For what was, at best, grievous negligence, Grannon was sentenced to 3 years in jail. Pepper's actions injected more hurt into the senseless tragedy and the fragmented family it left behind. Her theft directly affected memory efforts. Some of the cash she stole was meant for a memory garden for Stanley. Thanks to Pepper's selfishness, that garden was never built. Instead, she had allegedly spent it on clothes, utilities, carryout, and more, living well above her meager means. Hull Crown Court had no mercy for Pepper. The scammer had gone the last 3 years of running her charity without keeping accurate records. This breach of law kept the court from accurately calculating how much money had gone missing. Judge John Thackeray described the defendant harshly and asserted that the only way to deal with her was to lock her up. In March of 2022, he handed down her sentence. Serving under her new name, Kaylee Towler, the fraudster is enduring 20 months in prison. Number 2. The Eyedropper. Jesse Krasuski of Franklin, Wisconsin, stumbled upon a horrifying sight. He found a friend she'd been caring for sitting dead in the living room. Krasuski made the call to authorities on October 3rd, 2018, a bit before 5 p.m. Upon arrival, there wasn't much that authority crews could do. They found the resident of the address unresponsive, surrounded by crushed-up pills and prescription bottles. It wasn't hard to assume what had happened. Krasuski told police she had observed disturbing behavior in her friend, identified by courts as Lynn Hernan, leading up to her passing. The victim didn't have much contact with anybody besides Krasuski, and she was thus the only one who noticed when the victim's medicine intake began to fluctuate. Krasuski gave police a tiny amount of information when the investigation first began. While this appeared to be a cut-and-dried case on the surface, they still had to follow protocol. Procedures drifted away from Krasuski in 2 new directions: other people the victim knew and Hernan's autopsy. Krasuski, it should be noted, claimed to be Hernan's power of attorney. She also claimed to be checking in on her twice a day. Combined with previous revelations, this makes for a rather odd situation if it's all true. Investigators submitted the victim's corpse for examination, but that route would take time. During that time, they turned to family and friends. Krasuski's claims of the victim being a recluse proved untrue. People linked to Hernan painted her as one who would never take her own life. Things unraveled when Hernan's will named Krasuski as the sole heir. This drew the attention of the victim's cousin, who went to the police with concerns that the will wasn't genuine. Something fishy was going on here. Further investigation led to Krasuski's arrest in July 2019 after a warrant went out the previous month. A search of her home was also conducted. It eventually came to light that Krasuski had been engaging in fraudulent activities involving Hernan's finances. She wrote fake checks, spent the victim's money, and more. Between all of it, it's estimated that Krasuski got her hands on nearly $300,000 of Hernan's money. Hernan's autopsy revealed a detail that should have been shocking, but at this point, it wasn't too hard to see coming. The substances found around the victim's body weren't the cause of death. Instead, the victim died from a massive intake of tetrahydrosaline, the main ingredient of many over-the-counter eye drops. Taking eye drops through the eye as they should be will never put you near a lethal dose. You'll probably just cry it all out. Instead, the eye drops would have to be ingested. The circumstances here were simply too suspicious to ignore. Not only had the victim gone out via a bizarre self-elimination method, but someone staged the scene to look more conventional. When police confronted Krasuski with all of this, she pulled out several details she hadn't revealed before. Chief among these was the claim that Hernan had made a habit of drinking Visine long before the fatal dose. In one instance, she claimed that Hernan asked to be handed a water bottle containing 6 vials of eye drops. Krasuski was at a loss to explain why she complied, though she did note that she thought the victim had, by that point, built up an immunity. Before she was arrested, Krasuski seemed to tell on herself by calling the cops and asking about the toxicology results in the case. She said they'd probably find something interesting if they looked. The results weren't shared with her until after her arrest. The story changed up a bit when Krasuski was formally accused. She said the victim must have faked taking her own life alone, but couldn't say why. Additionally, she asserted that she had never given the victim any eye drops, despite noting that Hernan was fond of the substance. A cellmate in the Waukesha County Jail uncovered perhaps the clearest evidence yet in the case. The inmate claimed that Krasuski had a breakdown in her cell and confessed. The confession, however, included the sentiment that Krasuski believed she had committed a merciful act. She knew what everyone would think, but swears that's not why she did it. Court records indicate that Krasuski claimed to have some evidence to back up her claims. She said that a storage unit contained a recording of the victim's will, signed papers, Vicine bottles, and other pieces that would be of interest. She asked to be let loose to get the items, but her request was denied. From there, the story changed again. Now she said the items were buried in a nearby park in freezer bags. She was never set loose to get the buried treasure, as they feared she'd skip out on her $1 million bail. Instead, authorities used a map that Krasuski drew up and even video called her from the park. The alleged evidence was never found. While circumstantial evidence was piled high, there's nothing solid to point at Krasuski. For Krasuski, committing a money-motivated murder wouldn't be entirely out of character. She's got a record stretching back to 2005, rife with fraud and other financial transgressions. Multiple cases paint her as a serial fraudster, and all the evidence in this case points to more of the same. Hernan's financial activities began to reflect Krasuski near the end. It's worth noting that Krasuski also has a gambling problem. As anyone who's been down that road or dealt with an addict will tell you, that would provide sufficient motivation. Number 1. Scammy daycare. In 2021, a Melbourne woman named Ola Uda and several partners were caught in a massive sting operation targeting scammers taking federal funds. Uda was allegedly in the driver's seat of a daycare with fraudulent enrollments, among other illegitimate enterprises. Uda and partners stand accused of scamming some $15 million in taxpayer dollars. Uda was the sole owner of Prime Family Daycare out of Thomastown. Authorities found that many children listed as enrolled at the facility weren't receiving care at all. Uda used these ghost kids to pull down massive government funding through childcare subsidies. Additionally, she took full advantage of the country's Job Keeper program by netting $2.4 million in federal payments for a restaurant she ran with partner Amjad Shihada. Uda's alleged scam empire funded her high-end lifestyle. Multiple social media posts flaunted her travels, high standard of living, and expensive items like cars, clothes, investment properties, and jewelry. Uda was the most prominent of the alleged fraud ring in showing off, but authorities assert that others involved also scored substantial sums. The Instagram account that once served as Uda's stage went private. In Uda's case, not all of the wealth on display was her own. In one photo, she's seen posing with a Maserati Ghibli. This model from the premium manufacturer cost between $70,000 and $110,000, depending on the configuration. The catch? The car didn't belong to her. It was on lease by a company her husband owned, despite bearing a vanity plate that said El Boss. The money that Uda got from her fake daycare enrollees came from federal government subsidies. Australia's childcare subsidy payment system was the vehicle for the fraud. The scheme was made possible because, like some private school scholarship programs, payments aren't made to the parents. Instead, the money from the program is put directly into the hands of the providers. The parents play a minimal role. This means that all Uda needed to carry out her plan was a bit of creative forgery and the time and effort to create fake parental accounts in federal databases. She cut out the middleman and could easily approve and route payments to her bank account. The JobKeeper program, meanwhile, was Australia's answer to COVID-19 and the strain it put on businesses. The program pays out to companies so they can maintain payroll. Business owners first submit proof of payment to employees with various parameters required to qualify. Employees can qualify if they make at least $1,500 every 2 weeks before taxes. Once an employee is considered qualified, the federal treasury will pay out $1,500 every other week for each qualifying employee. In the same way that Uda created fake parents to appease the feds, they made fake employees for the restaurant. They also fudged payment info to get payments for some employees who wouldn't have qualified or would have required the employer to make top-up payments on the difference. The sting operation that caught Uda and her partners was a small part of a much larger operation. Scams in the same vein as hers are far from unheard of. Daycares and schools using fraudulent means to obtain government funding are fairly common. This, of course, means that such cases hit the news often. In an ironic twist that likely sprung from a guilty conscience, Uda caught wind of one such scam in her industry and went off. The case in question landed in the publication A Current Affair and caught her attention. Taking to her Facebook soapbox, Uda called the scam disgusting and said that such fraud is wreaking havoc on the childcare industry. As mentioned above, the sting operation that took Uda down was one of immense scale. Over 11 months, agents focused on uncovering scams like hers. Over 150 officers of the Australian Federal Police were involved. 110 members of 4 different federal departments helped them out. The operation culminated in raids on 10 properties across Victoria and New South Wales. In Uda's case, officers pulled her from her private home in Doncaster East. This all happened near the end of 2020. Prime Family Daycare's license to receive federal payments was suspended first, then finally canceled in August 2021. Uda's LinkedIn profile has seen radio silence since the story broke, but still lists her as a proprietor of that establishment. Authorities mentioned that it could take a while to figure out how much money went missing and what charges would come from it. The most recent news says Uda and her associates are facing various fraud charges, with the heftiest one being conspiracy to cause a loss to the Commonwealth. Click to watch one of these next videos. Let us know in the comments section who you think runs more scams in the government, the Republicans or the Democrats.